Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com. Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of Mythic Cast. I'm your host Spencer, and this week I'm joined by no one. That's right, no one. This week is a solo episode, and listen at the end of the cast because we're going to talk about how often those might be. Before we get into the main episode this week, which is going to be a deck tech on Temur Ramp. That's right, Temur Ramp. You've seen the blue-green, but I live that Temur life, baby. Let's go. So before we get into that, I do want to mention our sponsors. This week's episode is brought to you by Rockstar Recovery, specifically the orange one, the orange Rockstar Recovery. No, that's actually not true. It's not. I'm just addicted, so yeah, it's not sponsored. But it could be Rockstar because I'm addicted. No, just kidding. No, this podcast is obviously brought to you by Pure MTGO and their sponsors over at Mana Traders. At MTGO Traders. Thank you so much to our sponsor. They're sponsored the entire Constructed Criticism Network. It's pretty awesome of them. It's super hype, and it's super appreciated. So check them out. They have all of the Constructed Criticism Network content over on their website. And don't forget to tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. With that being said, let's go right into the show. This week, we are talking about, that's right, Temur. So, a couple weeks ago, I had Trey on, right? And we were talking about the blue-green deck. And, you know, I really, really love the blue-green deck. I even loved Trey's version of the deck. I got to play it quite a bit after Trey and I talked. The deck is just sweet, to be completely honest. But for me, one of the things that I really like about the Temur version is that it takes a lot of the things that Trey is able to do, and the blue-green decks are able to do, and kind of enhances them, and we'll talk about that kind of throughout the episode. So, let's go over the main deck. We have 3 Royal Grazers, 2 Hydroid Krasis, 4 Leafkin Druid, 4 Risen Reef, 2 Euro Titan of Nature's Wrath, 3 Omnath, 1 Thassa Deep Dwelling, 4 Cavalier of Thorns, 1 Agent of Treachery, 3 Nissa Who Shakes the World, 2 Perforos's Intervention, 2 Finale of Devastation, 2 Quasi-Duplicate, and 27 lands. I think the key land to point out here, and kind of how the mana base works that you'll have to remember, is there's 4 Fabled Passage with 5 forests, 2 islands, and 1 mountain. The 1 mana mountain really doesn't matter in the main deck. You only really ever need 1 red source. In the sideboard, however, it is important to remember that you only have 1 mountain when you understand about your Chandra Awakened Inferno. It is the only double red spell in your deck. It costs 6 mana, and I've never had a problem casting it, but don't think that you can get the second red off of Fabled Passage. So that's something to really consider from the mana base. But other than that, let's kind of talk about the main deck. So this deck wins through a variety of ways. It is a ramp deck, so you're going to gain a lot of advantages, and that's the first way that it wins. Omnath plus Risen Reef plus Thassa is one just win condition that just happens. But the main way that it wins is going to be through either Perforos's Intervention or Finale of Devastation. These X spells are going to be the thing that's going to end the game. You got to the point where you could cast the Perforos's Intervention for maybe it's 7 or 11 or something like that. Because of the things that you did before that. And the same thing is true when you do a Finale of Devastation for 10. The main win, obviously the main win condition in the deck is actually Nissa Who Shakes the World. Nissa is going to gain you advantage, even put you further ahead in mana, things like that. So that's typically the way that the deck wins. If you had to give the deck a key card, it's probably Risen Reef. I mean, the Leafkin Druid, Risen Reef, Omnath, Cavalier of Thorns package with Thassa is just obviously very good. You just gain a ton of advantage throughout the game, and Thassa is just also another way that you can win the game through that advantage. Once it's put together, you can start tapping down your opponent's creatures and deal them huge chunks of damage, and the game kind of just ends from there. The other thing to remember about Risen Reef is just its synergy with Quasi Duplicate. Something that Trey mentioned on the last episode was just not being afraid to use your Quasi Duplicate. You have the second side. That's just very true with Risen Reef. I think I've even found myself cloning Leafkin Druids just to get to the extra mana. Using your mana every turn that you can is kind of a basic principle that people learn pretty early on in Magic. And while you definitely still have to remember to be making effective plays and to be impacting the board and things like that, I do find it more true in this mana that basic principle returns true. You want to try and use your mana every turn, very much in this deck. Uh, I think that if I was going to give the deck a second key card, it would be Nissa. There was actually 4 Nissa in the 75, and we'll talk about that when we get to the sideboard as to why there's not. But it's definitely one that you could consider. Like I think I was going to talk about this later in the episode, but I'll just talk about it now. These 2 Hydroid Krasis that you see in the deck, they are very good. But I think that you could make them either Nyxborn Ancient or another Nissa, and either a Thassa or an Agent of Treachery, kind of depending on how you want to build the deck, and actually be a little bit better off. I don't know that the life gain has mattered a ton. Like you do have another life gain engine in Euro, so I don't know that it's mattered a ton. It certainly is not something that I've tried yet, is cutting the Hydroid Krasis, but like Trey said, sometimes, I mean, this deck obviously started out with way more of them, and we've been cutting them down, because honestly, other than, being this thing that draws you cards, which you don't really have a problem with in this deck, it's not very good. Like, the life gain just hasn't mattered enough, so it's definitely something that you could consider trimming for that 4th Nissa. But the reason that Nissa is so important in the deck is just her ability to take over a game and make the game about Nissa, and rather than making the game about your life total. Like, she completely warps the game around her, like many planeswalkers do, and I think that has been fundamentally very important for this deck. The mana is really good. I haven't had basically any problems casting spells. I think the worst land in the deck is probably Steam Vents, and you could consider cutting that for maybe another green temple. Um, Other than that, it's mostly fine. Like, the Steam Vents is in the deck because it's an untapped land that lets you play a blue source to cast Risen Reef, but I could see that one changing. Outside of that, the mana's pretty good. The Fable Passages you're often playing on turn 1. It's so easy to get to 4 lands that other than that, you don't really notice the tap part of that. But it is, like I said, it's important to nut the mountain, as we mentioned earlier. The sideboard is 2 Aether Gust, 2 Fry, 2 Negate, 2 Flame Sweep, 2 Thrashing Brontodon, 1 Chandra Novice Pyromancer, 2 Shifting Ceratops, and 2 Chandra Awakened Inferno. So the thing that I was talking about why there are not 4 Nisses in the 75 is because the 4th one actually used to be in the sideboard, and it actually got replaced by this Chandra Novice Pyromancer. And the reason is, while I was testing this deck, I found that I wanted a cheaper spell against blue-white control specifically out of the board, other than just Shifting Ceratops that was like a Planeswalker effect. And Chandra ends the game really, really quickly if you get creatures in play, because you play so many elementals. It lets your Leafkin Druids attack, stuff like that. So because I had more things that went from early mana basically to go from 2 to 3 or 2 to 4, basically your opponent can no longer play things like the Wall of Omens effect. I think it's like Birth of Eliteness anymore, because you can just punish them with your Shifting Ceratops and your other stuff. I mean, Shifting Ceratops doesn't really matter because it's already can't be countered, but that actually might bait them into it so that you can play something along the lines of a Chandra or a Nissa. So I liked it being cheaper because it let me immediately go out right after they played it a Birth on turn 2, and also made it so they couldn't play it on turn 2 after that. But that's also true of Nissa, so it's more the first than the second. Overall, I think the sideboard says a lot about the main deck for this. The thing is you'll notice that there's so many 2-ofs in the sideboard, and the reason for that is because when you have a deck that's synergistic like this, you're either shaving stuff, like maybe you cut an Arboreal Grazer, or you have cards that are really bad. Once again, like Arboreal Grazer, and you're just like, hey, I want all of these out, and I want to bring in pieces that are just better. So the sideboard is full of very versatile cards, so that they can, and also lots of bridge cards like Aether Gust, Fry, Negate, Flame Sweep, even Thrashing Brontodon against aggro decks, Chandra Novice Fire March, all of those cards bridge you to something bigger in different ways. Whether it's either just putting the thing back on top, negate, stopping your opponent from advancing, or by protecting your stuff. Fry is a little less bridgy, just depending on the matchup it can be, but removal spells can act as bridge spells as well. So the board, takes out the things that are like, okay, these cards are bad. We're gonna replace them with something better. And you might think like, oh, that's sideboarding 101, but some decks have specific sideboard plans in mind. And while this deck can do that, and I'll certainly make a sideboard guide and be posting it over in the Constructive Criticism Discord, it is just, I think, important to note that this sideboard is versatile for a reason, and a lot of that has to do with because your main deck is so synergistic. I kind of already talked about this in a little bit, but I'll go into it a little bit more detail. With Hydrocasis being something you could consider cutting, there's a couple of different areas you could go. One of them is since you have the finale, you could have both a Nyxborn Ancient and an Agent of Treachery. If you have a Nyxborn Agent as one of the cards that you replace for Hydrocasis, I actually don't really find that big of a reason to have the fourth Nissa right now. What you could do in that case is instead play a second Thassa. And then you have, another thing that's kind of like an X spell in Thassa, and another thing like Nissa in the main deck that's like a big threat that gives you a big man advantage. This also makes your quasi duplicate game better. It's also an elemental that goes in the deck. So those, if I was gonna make a change right now, I think that would be the change I would make. Would be Cuto Hydroid Krasis, or the Hydrocasis for a Nyxborn Ancient and a Thassa. I would also consider just doing another Nissa and another Agent or another Thassa if you wanted the 4 Nissas, which is totally reasonable as well. But yeah, those are kind of the things that I would consider moving forward. I always like to, talk about where I'm at with the deck and what I'm questioning. I think that there's always room that you can try new things, and I want to be conscientious of that to you, the listener. I think that if there's decks that I don't want to play against the most with this deck, by the way, it's probably going to be mono red. I think the matchup is still better than the blue green version, which would you think would be funny because you have 4 more shock lands or 5 more shock lands. But I really do. I think that their removal spells are good. Omnath just makes your stuff big, makes it harder for them to deal with. And while doing that Wicked Wolf impression, yeah, I think that Mono Red is still the one that I don't want to play. And then I think I have really enjoyed my time playing against Control with this deck for the most part. I haven't minded that too much, or my time with Fires. I think those are 2 decks that I've been mostly okay with. But the thing that I think you really want to play against with this version is the Mirror. Omnath is pretty huge game in the Mirror specifically. And being able to kill their stuff with something like Perforos's Intervention is also a big game. I think that if anything that we've covered with this deck is interesting to you, please leave a comment. Let me know. Tweet at me. You can tweet at me at Spence30H. You can also just tweet at the episode. It'll be on the Arena Mythic Cast Twitter feed. This deck's really fun. It's something that I've been enjoying. Obviously, no surprise to anybody. I live that Temur life. But it truly is a deck that I've enjoyed, and I hope that people will check it out. Before we go, as the title of this suggests, I want to kind of talk about the future of the show. And I said that this would be a solo episode, and I wanted to make sure that I gave some Magic content with that. Temur Ramp is the deck that I'm playing in Standard. I thought about doing one in Historic because that's the format I've been playing the most of. But since this podcast is going to be about getting Mythic, I wanted to make sure that I did it with the only deck that I've really played in Ladder in the last month. I wanted to do it on a Standard deck since that's the thing that you'd be getting Mythic with. With that being said, let's talk about the future of the show. So there will be solo episodes now, but they'll be pretty rare. I've already reached out to the entire top 8 of the CCMTG Open to ask them if they wanted to come on and talk about their tournament and about Standard and things like that. But there will also be set reviews. I'm going to start adding Limited into this podcast. So if you get Mythic Unlimited, you can tweet at us with your deck. We will retweet it, and we'll try and find a time to get you on the show as well. Just as a way to include everybody that's trying to get Mythic. There are lots of different types of competitive Magic players, but there are also lots of areas for us all to improve at. And that could be for you. It could be that what you're trying to improve at right now is limited, and we want to make sure that we're giving everybody who's playing Magic and trying to improve the opportunity to express themselves, and also more opportunities for people to learn. So with that being said, we'll now have two three types of Mythic guests, I guess, as we'll call them. Mythic guest one is going to be the same thing that you've heard every week on this show. We invite somebody on that's gotten Mythic and talk to them about the deck that they got Mythic with, or a deck that they're playing right now in Mythic, and give them an opportunity to talk about their run to Mythic, what they play Magic for, the same type of stuff we've been doing recently. You can be a part of that just by tweeting at Arena Mythic Cast, and like I said, same thing with the limited stuff. We'll throw you a retweet and hopefully if get you on the show as well to talk about that deck and to talk about your achievement. The other one will be those limited shows that we already mentioned. And then the third type of Mythic guest, I just want an opportunity to talk to the amazing people that I've met in Magic. I've met amazing people. I want to bring Seth on the show or John on the show and PV and just talk about what is it about Magic that inspires you? What makes you better? How do you improve at this game? How can people learn from your experiences? So this will give me an opportunity to do that as well. So we'll have three different type of mythical guests, and then I think that the last thing is just personal type of episodes. If I go to a Pro Tour for some reason, or if I go to an SEG Open, or something like that, or I might be qualified for the next Game Bird Invitational or something. So if I want to do a tournament report on that, or a deck guide like this, if there's something that hey, like you should really be playing this, I might do an individual episode on that. And then it's possible that I'll get different type of guests for something like a sealed episode. I might find a guest to do something like that, or just a straight up deck dunk looking. This is something that I used to do over on Wednesday Night Warrior, but I'd love to do episodes where I just kind of go over a deck dump and talk about where a format looks like it is. So that's going to do it for this week. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. Don't forget to listen to the show every week over on the Constructive Criticism Network or over on our sponsor at puremto.com. You can find the show at Arena Mythic Cast. You can also hit that sub button, hit that like button over on YouTube if you're watching there. And if you're listening at home, leave us a review. It's actually really helpful for podcasts when you leave them those positive reviews on iTunes. It actually helps quite a bit. So if you had the time to do that and you like what this show is doing and where we're going and trying to help people get Mythic, it'd be really appreciated. That is going to do it for this week. You can find me at Spencer13H. And, thank you so much, everybody, for all of the time that you've spent listening to this show. This show has been a lot of fun to do, and I'm excited to keep doing it. A lot of people reached out and asked, Spencer, are you going to keep doing this show now that you quit CC? And the answer was, to me, going to be yes, but I just wanted to take some time to think about it. With me leaving constructive criticism, there was a lot on my mind, and I appreciate that people have reached out, and I'm really excited for the future of this show here on Mythic Cast. So thank you, everybody, so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you guys all next week with a brand new episode.